Hey everyone, hello. It's me, Haider Ali1, and today we will talk about a human eye, which is also known as the bulbous oculi. So, about the bulbous oculi or human eye, I would like to tell you first of all that it's a globular organ. It's a globular shape, which is placed into a orbital cavity or a socket, a bony socket, into which eye is placed by God. So first of all, I would like to tell you the basic structures of eye. Let me show you what is the basic diagram of eye. So this is just like this. It bulges out up to here and have such a basic structure into which different layers are interposed and different structures are present. I will talk later, but first of all you should know about the basic structure of the eye. Basic structure of the eye, the outermost structure of the eye, which is, if you talk about the layers of eye, then this structure, which is the outermost structure of the eye, contains the two basic layers. What are these? The first one is about sclera. Now you are saying that what is sclera? If you are saying that these lines are sclera, then you are wrong. I am talking about the sclera. So from here, all the layer up to here is sclera. This is known as sclera. I will tell you just the basic information about the structure of the eye. Later on I will go into detail and I will discuss the every part of the eye in detail. So this layer is called the sclera. Now this part of the eye, except sclera, is known as the cornea. So the basic structure and outermost structure of the eye contains sclera and cornea. Cornea basically is a transparent structure. It is basically the transparent structure and basically the exposed part of the eye. Now if you talk about the sclera, then you can say that sclera is the toughest structure. It is the outermost layer of the eye. Now being outermost layer, the property of sclera is it is the toughest structure. The second property and characteristic of sclera is that it is white in color. It also covers the cornea up to periphery, and it is also seen into the exposed part, but it is white in color and also called as white of eye. Now sclera is the toughest part of the eye and cornea is the transparent part of the eye. Now cornea is exposed part of the eye, but sclera is little exposed part. Now if you go in detail, I will like to tell you something here most interesting, that there are two curvatures here, an anterior curvature, this one, and posterior curvature, this one. Now the center of anterior curvature is known as anterior pole. And the center of posterior curvature is known as posterior pole. And the most interesting thing is that if a line joins the center of anterior curvature or it joins the anterior pole, to the posterior pole. It is known as the optic axis. It is known as optic axis. Now there is also another axis here I will discuss, that medially to a little medial to anterior pole and lateral to posterior pole, there is also another line. It is also called as visual axis. Now there are two types of axis, an optic axis and visual axis. An optic axis is a line joining the anterior pole to the posterior pole, and little medial to anterior pole and little lateral to posterior pole, a line is joining the 2 points, which is known as the visual axis. Now if you talk about the diameter and radius of the eye, then you can say that the diameter of eye is 0.4 millimeter. This is the diameter of eye. And if you talk about the radius, then you can say that the radius is 8 millimeter. Now in the previous page, I want to tell you one thing more. Then medial to the posterior pole, here is the anterior pole, here is the posterior pole. Now medial to the posterior pole is a part known as optic nerve. This optic nerve leaves the eye here. Now I will like to discuss other structures of the eye. So basically, if I draw eye roughly to tell you the other structures, now I will like to tell you that eye is just placed into a cavity. It is known as orbital cavity. Orbital cavity. Now if you imagine that this is the cavity, this is the orbital cavity in which the eye has placed. Now between the eye and the orbital cavity, between the eye and orbital cavity there is no space, and in place of space there is some special tissues are present, known as, here is some special tissues are present known as areolar tissues. So areolar tissues are interposed between the bony socket and the eye. And one thing more, that eye also has muscles. Eye also has muscles which are attached to this bony cavity. This helps in remaining in position of eye into the bony cavity, but the basic function of these areolar tissues is to just act as cushions, and these prevent eye from external pressures. So these muscles which are attached to eye and to the bony socket are known as ocular muscles. Ocular muscles. Next is the part which is most important part of the eye. This is known as eyelids. So if you talk about eyelids, then you can see that eyelids play important role in preventing the eye from dust particles. They prevent eye from dust particles. How they prevent eye from the dust particles? A lot of cilia are present in each eyelids, round about 100 to 150 in upper eyelid and about 50 in lower eyelid. Now, what are the function of these cilia in preventing the eye from dust particles? These cilia basically are present into the follicles. And these follicles contain a lot of sensory nerve plexus. When a dust particle comes in contact with these cilia or follicles, the sensory nerve plexus play an important role by conveying a message to central nervous system. Hence, they contract and results in blinking of eye. So by this action, they play an important role in preventing the eye from dust particles. Now, if you see eye clearly, if you see the structure of eye clearly, then you can say that there is a difference between the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid. There is a difference between the upper eyelid, or you can say that there is a space between upper eyelid and lower eyelid when it's not blinking. This space is known as palpebral fissure. Now this space is known as palpebral fissure, which is exposed when eye is open, and in adult it is about 25 millimeter long when the eye is basically open. Now next, let me tell you about a delicate and most important structure of eye. It is basically a conjunctiva. If you talk about the conjunctiva, so you can say that it is a thin mucous membrane. It is a thin mucous membrane which covers the exposed part of eye. Or you can say that which covers the cornea basically. So it has it is also present on the exposed part of eye, and it is also present on the eyelids in the inner side of the eye. So the part which is present on the cornea is known as bulbar portion, and a part which is present in the eyelids is known as palpebral portion. Now what is the bulbar portion and what is the palpebral portion? Later I will discuss when I will draw the structure of eye very clearly, and I will tell you everything very clearly when I will draw every part of the eye. Now there is also an important structure of eye, which is known as lacrimal glands. Lacrimal glands play an important role in producing tears. They produce tears when you are sad. They produce also tears when you are happy. So tears can occur in both conditions. Either you are happy or not, or you are in state of sadness. What is the function of tears, and what is the role of tear in preventing the eye from different infections and different dust particles? Basically, the nature of tear is hypertonic. The basic nature of tear is hypertonic. So tear fluid are hypertonic fluid. So when the tear flows over the conjunctiva, flows over the surface of the eye, due to its hypertonic nature, it washes eye. It also keep the conjunctiva almost kept moist. And the most important function of tear is it prevent infection. Furthermore, tear also contain the lysozymes. What is the function of lysozymes? That they kills bacteria. And one thing more, that the secretion of tear is controlled by parasympathetic facial, or you can say that the seventh cranial nerve. Next, now I'm going to tell you the basic structures of eye, and I'm going to draw the basic so let me tell you the basic structure of eye, and I will discuss in detail the different layers of eye and different structures of eye. So first of all, let me to draw the different layers of eye. Here is the sclera. Now it's a path for the optic nerve. Here is also sclera. And now this is the cornea. Now the outermost structure of eye, outermost layer of eye, the basic layer of eye is known as sclera, which protects the inner layer of the eye, which protects the inner structures of the eye, is known as sclera. But if you talk about the outermost coat, outermost layer, and the outermost part of the eye, then you can say in medical science or in medical term that it is known as tunica fibrosa. Basically, eye has three type of layers. Eye has three layers. So outermost layer or outermost coat is known as tunica fibrosa. Now inner to outermost layer, this one, inner to the outermost, also second to the outermost, is known as tunica vasculosa. Or middle layer. Middle layer of eye. So indicated by the name that this is the tunica fibrosa, this is the tunica vasculosa. This means that the sclera and the cornea, because the outermost layer contains the sclera and cornea. So sclera and cornea are not vascular layers. As indicated by the name, these are fibrous in nature. These are made of fibrous tissues, elastic tissues, or you can say that the sclera is made up of white elastic fibers or white elastic tissues. So they are made up of elastic fibers or elastic white elastic or fibrous tissues. When we move toward the second layer, which is known as the tunica vasculosa, so we can say that this layer is highly vascular. This layer is highly vascular, which provides the nutrition to the the most delicate layer of the eye, which is known as the retina, which I'm going to draw now after discussing about it. So tunica vasculosa is highly vascular. What does it mean? It's highly vascular, that it contains the veins, it also contains the arteries, and basically it contains the capillary plexus, which provides the nutrition, which provides basically the blood supply to the innermost delicate structure known as retina. Now going to the retina, before going toward the retina, here I am going to tell you one thing, that there is a space between the outer sclera and the inner choroid. It is known as the perichoroidal space. It is known as perichoroidal space. Now outermost layer is composed of sclera and cornea. Next to the outermost layer, the middle layer composed of three things: choroid, secondary. When it goes toward end, here this layer become more thick. Here is also this thickened part of the choroid, which is the middle layer, is known as ciliary body. And now further from the ciliary body, here is a structure on both sides, which is known as iris. Here is a diaphragm like structure with aperture in the center or space in the center. It is known as pupil. This space is known as pupil. Now the second layer is composed of choroid, ciliary body and iris. This layer from choroid up to ciliary body, including iris, is also known as uveal tract. It is also known as uveal tract. Now going toward the most important structure of the eye, the most important layer of the eye, you can say that the retina. It is the only layer of the eye, or it is the only part of the eye which is basically interlinked or interdirected to the central nervous system. So retina is basically derived from the central nervous system. How it is derived from the central nervous system, I will tell later in my lecture. it is related to the central nervous system. All the other structures are not connected to the central nervous system, but the retina is derived from the central nervous system. Or you can say it's a common sense that when a light enters the eye, it basically absorbed, not reflected or refracted, it basically absorbed into the retinal layer, and retinal layer there are present rods and cones and different pigmented cells which convert, which are, you can say that which act like a transducer. Now the function of the transducer is to change one type of energy into another type of energy, and they convert the magnetic energy into